Falter-Podcasts werden durch Werbung unterstützt. Das hilft bei der Finanzierung unseres journalistischen Angebots. Falter-Radio.
Sehr herzlich willkommen, meine Damen und Herren, im Falter-Radio. Sie hören in dieser Folge eine junge Texanerin, deren Schicksal bei den Wiener Festwochen in einem Theaterstück zu verfolgen ist. Is This a Room lautet der Titel des Stücks der New Yorker Theatermacherin Tina Sattler. Es ist ab 13. Juni zu sehen. Bei Is This a Room geht es um eine texanische Whistleblowerin, die Reality Winner heißt. Die junge Frau war nach einer Verurteilung wegen Geheimnisverrats im Gefängnis und befindet sich jetzt im Hausarrest in Texas. Laut Gericht hat sie Geheimdienstinformationen über die russische Einflussnahme in der amerikanischen Politik veröffentlicht. In den USA läuft eine Kampagne für eine Begnadigung von Reality Winner durch Präsident Biden. Doch hören Sie mehr von Martin Pesl, der im Falter die Wiener Festwochen begleitet und der mit dem unfreiwilligen Festwochenstar Reality Winner gesprochen hat.
Hallo, mein Name ist Martin Pesl und ich schreibe im Falter über Theater. Ein Theaterstück ist auch der Anlass für das besondere Interview, das ich führen durfte, mit der Air Force-Veteranin und Whistleblowerin Reality Winner. Ja, sie heißt wirklich so. Reality Winner ist 1991 in Texas geboren und sie hat im Jahr 2017, als Donald Trump noch recht frisch im US-Präsidentenamt war, als Sprachexpertin gearbeitet für eine private Firma. Sie hatte Farsi- und Pashto-Kenntnisse und aufgrund ihrer Vergangenheit beim Militär Zugang zu Geheiminformationen. Im Mai 2017 ist Winner auf ein solches geheimes Dokument gestoßen, das eine russische Einmischung in die Präsidentschaftswahl 2016 beschrieben hat. Sie hat das Dokument ausgedruckt und an das Aufdeckermedium The Intercept geschickt. Wenige Wochen später stand dann das FBI mit einem Durchsuchungsbefehl vor ihrem Haus in Georgia. Sie wurde verhaftet und später zu einer außergewöhnlich langen Haftstrafe verurteilt. Seit einem Jahr ist sie frei, aber auf Bewährung. Noch bis November 2024 muss Reality Winner bestimmte Auflagen erfüllen. Sie wohnt im Haus ihrer Mutter in Texas, wo ich sie auch erreicht habe. Auf dem Transkript der 68-minütigen Vernehmung, die der FBI-Agent Garrick auf Tonband aufgenommen hat, basiert das Theaterstück Is This a Room der New Yorker Regisseurin Tina Sattler, das ab 13. Juni auch bei den Wiener Festwochen zu sehen ist. Ich habe mit der realen Reality Winner über Zoom gesprochen und sie als erstes gefragt, wie es ihr damit geht, dass sie dieses Stück, dessen Hauptfigur und unfreiwillig auch Co-Autorin sie ist, nie gesehen hat.
Right, I've never seen it. Frankly, I have no intention of seeing it.
You have not? Why not?
I just don't think I could relive it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or you know, they had the transcript and not so much the audio, and they didn't have the visuals of what everything was like, the chaos that was going around the three main characters, you know?
Exactly.
So I just can't. I don't want to like not only relive the trauma, but be like fact checking along the way.
Okay. So you would tell them, no, this is not right. This is not right. And he looked completely different and she doesn't look like me, etc. Okay, I see.
Yeah, little things like that. And so, I mean, for me, having lived it, it would be just really weird.
Mm-hmm. But you did agree when you heard a couple of years ago that a play was being made out of those, I think, 68 minutes. What do you think when you heard that this was about to happen, and what made you agree?
Actually, I didn't have a say in the matter, so it wasn't like I agreed or not. I just heard from my mother that it was happening. The play would take place.
Yeah.
And we had actually just had an extremely, it was 8 hours, a very contentious hearing about the nature of that, whether or not it was an official interrogation or not.
Uh-huh.
And whether I knew pretty much like the legal severity of what I had opened up to and told the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And basically those very same agents got on the stand, Agent Garrick, and said, he was in fear of his life, that they had no idea how dangerous I was. They had no idea what I was capable of at the time. Mm-hmm. And we actually went over, that's why the idea of the transcript or those exact words is so traumatic to me, because I had already relived that in a courtroom in shackles, in which both sides were basically arguing the nature of that conversation. The female prosecutor said that, because as a young woman, she was so cavalier about it, that I was somehow insidious and manipulative.
Okay.
And I, instead of being afraid for my life, which I was, afraid for my animals' lives, trying just to be as complacent and complicit as possible. And then, of course, the agents themselves said, they were in fear. Mm-hmm. And that certainly does not come across in the transcript or the play. They had complete control of the situation. So I've already been through it once where there's two different interpretations of that transcript, which is why I just can't bear to watch it again. Shortly after that was when they announced that they were going to make a play out of it, because we lost the motion to throw out the confession, because it wasn't a legal confession, because at no point was I free to leave, which made it an interrogation. And they said on the stand about 6 different ways that I could have walked away from that at any time. They would not have pursued me. They would not have arrested me. They didn't completely block my car in. I could have magically gotten my car out. I could have been free to walk down the street without my ID. They wouldn't have harmed my animals while I wasn't present. Obviously I stuck around for my animals. They didn't Mirandize me before the interrogation. So we tried to have it thrown out as a confession, and we lost it. And they said that I was in full control of the situation. So to hear that, Tina and everyone else decided to turn it into a play, and that they immediately made it just off Broadway, and it captures the attention of a young woman who's definitely not in control of the situation. They were actually able to grasp that element of what had happened to me during that whole experience.
But you didn't know that then.
Right. Yeah. They didn't know. And it did feel like I was being rescued a little bit, like my life essence, who I was as a person, was being brought back to life, and that somebody out there did believe me when I said I was scared when they were interrogating me.
But I think Tina did talk to your mother about it, and she I think she wouldn't have done it if your mother would have been extremely opposed to the idea.
Right. And because of what we had gone through, it was such a Kafkaesque trial, because everything the prosecution said became fact. And this was in 2017. This was before the post-truth media, before fake news was just like another word, like a joke. We didn't understand how they could get up there and lie, and we weren't allowed to offer any legal argument against it. And everything they said became truth in the eyes of the most important person, which was the judge. So we had to take the fight to the public domain. And that's why my mother was so grateful for the play, for the interest to turn it into a play, that it wouldn't just be a circus, that it would be basically our petition to the American people that I was being wronged.
And did the play, now looking back, help you in any way? In the eyes of the public, at least, or I mean, it was off Broadway. It's still it's theater and not Hollywood, but still. Did it change something?
It did. I had a lot of incoming mail of support. And we had hoped, especially with this latest run late last year when we were on Broadway, that, it would have gotten some congressional leaders who are known to frequent Broadway to reach their ears, that they would have to walk at least past our photos, to get to their other plays, just to remind them that I'm still here. And what the FBI did to me that day was very much wrong. It wasn't fair. As many times as I've taken responsibility for what I did, and I don't ever walk back my plea deal, that interrogation that they claimed wasn't an interrogation, but then used my statements as if it were a legal and binding interrogation. Anybody can get caught up in that, and it's just not fair.
But there's nothing you can do about that, right? That's
right.
Now carved in stone, and all the judge can do is, I don't know, apologize one day, but they won't. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Right. One of the reasons the play is so fascinating to watch, I mean, I realize that this might sound really weird to you, but for a spectator, one of the fascinating things is that you seem to almost never lose your humor. You're definitely not threatening them. You seem very polite with them, and also I know there's one of them who wants to be the good cop, and you're kind of on good terms with him. But it looks and sounds in this adaptation, in this verbatim adaptation, like a particularly witty character. If someone had written this as fiction, do you consider yourself funny, humorous?
I definitely have a sense of humor and a sense of sarcasm in really tough times. I think it does come from growing up with a lot of grief. My father was always very ill, and he always found a way to do like the most hysterical things, despite dying, and I mean, even to his death, there was just always something that was just like tragically funny about everything. Same thing with my mom and her friends. They worked for Child Protective Services, and they were always venting and then joking about a very serious life and death job. And even throughout the military, there were times when, especially in basic training, when you think, oh my gosh, this is the scariest moment of my life. But when I tell this story to my family, next time I talk to them, it's going to be really funny. So it's always like that idea of when you think about something in the moment, always being able to think, okay, but when I'm telling somebody what happened tomorrow, where's the punchline going to be, and I also just wanted those officers, those agents, to see that I was a person. I was very much aware of the America that I was living in. I was very much aware of what a target I had just put on my back. I knew they were armed. I knew I had weapons in the house. And I just wanted them to see my humanity. Like, maybe this person who told like a little bit of a joke, it's going to be that much harder to shoot me in the back and then lie to the, lie about the circumstance. I wanted to be that much more human to them.
And did it work? I mean, sometimes I think it's their job not to react to any human behavior and to be very rigid about it.
I mean, as far as worked, quote unquote,
Yeah. I know.
They were more considerate with my cat. They didn't let her out because she was freaking out. My dog had some severe trauma with men. And of course, everybody on their team was male. And the last man I actually had in that house, she tried to attack viciously, and that ended our relationship.
Mhm.
So I mean, I knew that she could have flipped out at any time, and I just needed that enough space, enough humanity between me and those agents to get her put away from them and to get her secured. Because again, it was just like the situations playing in the back of my head that whole time where my cat gets out and I make a sudden move to go get her and they shoot me. Or my dog attacks an agent and they shoot the dog and I become hysterical and rush for my dog and then they shoot me. Everything went to, I'm going to rush to help my animals and then they're going to shoot me. That was in the back of my head. Behind every joke, it was, how can I avoid that situation?
Did you
So I
know
was
they
very
were
sure that it would
recording
happen.
the encounter?
They were for those 68 minutes, but there's also an hour before and 2 hours after. They showed up around 3:30 p.m. and I wasn't in a separate police car till like 7:30.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very, very long ordeal. That was not the first I had, that wasn't the last of it. That wasn't just, okay, well, now she's arrested. It was another hour of me repeatedly asking, am I under arrest? I asked 3 or 4 different times after the recording, and they said, we don't know yet. And in fact, when they did tell me, Agent Garrett told me, he said, Miss Winner, I'm sorry. We are going to have to take you in. It's going to be a bit of a drive. So he never said you're under arrest. He said, we'll have to take you in. It'll be a bit of a drive. He didn't say I was going to jail. And so I thought I was going to be disappeared. And that's when they said, you can get your phone out and you can call your family to make arrangements. And I was still terrified. So I called the lady to come pick up the foster dog and my cat. And then they said, well, don't you want to call your family? And I said, I don't know where I'm going. And they said, well, it's okay. You'll be in the car. And he gestured to the unmarked government vehicle. He said, you'll just be in the back seat with us. We'll cuff your hands in front and we'll be with you every step of the way. And again, so I was like, okay, fine, let me call my dad so they can at least come to the house and get some of my stuff, So I called my dad and I said, hey, I'm in trouble. Again, I couldn't tell him I was under arrest. They never said I was under arrest, I just said, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where they're taking me. I just know that I'm in trouble. And they're in the background. Why can't you tell him, Miss Winner? Why can't you tell him what you did? Why don't you know where you're going? Why don't you know what's going to happen to you? So Agent Garrett gets on the phone with my dad. He takes the phone from me and I just kind of go into shock. And so I don't know what he told my dad, but apparently he had told him that there would be a court hearing on Monday. So it was Saturday night and then he could he could call whatever number to find out more information about the hearing. That's all he told him. The only thing that saved me was that they had a warrant for my physical person. And even though I was wearing, you've seen the play, I was wearing hoochie shorts and a nearly see-through button. I mean, I was on a date and I was about to go back out on a date, they needed a female officer to come search my person.
Okay.
And so they called the nearest female police officer. And so that was the first police car that had shown up, the first marked vehicle. Everybody was in civilians, nobody was marked. And she showed up, she took me to the back room and patted me down, and that was it. Apparently, she went and had a conversation with the FBI agents. And I think she kindly reminded them, like, they couldn't arrest me, they couldn't take me to jail. So they called another female police officer. And so it was the second police car that showed up. She came and she said, hey, I'm going to have to cuff you behind your back and we'll put you in the car. And it's about 40 minutes to the jail. that was the first time somebody had told me, it's okay, you're just going to jail, you know? I never studied whistleblowers. I never studied what happened to them. I didn't even have an attorney. I mean, I knew what I did. I didn't have an attorney ready because I never thought of what I did in terms of criminal justice and the police being involved or the FBI. So when he said it was going to be a bit of a drive, the only person I ever knew about was Chelsea Manning, who disappeared to Quantico for 7 months. And that's until the police officer came to take me to jail and tell me I was going to jail. That's what I thought it was going to happen to me. Wow. So things were really serious. I mean, despite all the humor and despite the straightforward nature of that interview, the next hour afterward, when I was trying to decide if I was going to disappear forever or not, things got really serious after that.
And when you then were told and realized that you were just going to jail, did you think that you would never go back to that house?
I thought I would be out in a week. I thought everybody got pretrial release as long as you didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
I thought that was a given. I thought everybody got to post bail.
But that you would then be charged was clear after you had apparently confessed.
Yeah. I had no idea. They never told me when they read you your rights, you know, they never said you're going to be charged with 793E of the Espionage Act. They never read that. I didn't know what any of that was until I was standing in court the next Monday morning. They were extremely vague about everything.
When you then heard you'd have to do so much more time than anybody else so far under the Espionage Act, by then you did know what the implications were. Do you have an explanation why this was such a tough verdict?
I knew that we were in a conservative court in a very conservative part of Georgia. And to make that clear for everybody else, that judge was from the same city where Ahmaud Arbery was shot in the street by 3 white men. And not only did it take 2 months for those men to be even charged with manslaughter or murder, it would be another 1.5 years in rioting in the streets before they even decided to charge them with a hate crime. It's not really a part of the country known for justice. So, you know, and you could tell there were certain parts of it where the prosecution went above and beyond and cherry-picked journal entries and basically said that, you know, despite that what I did had nothing to do with terrorism, they tried to make it seem like, oh, well, if you grant her bail, she's going to go join ISIS. You know, they said because she speaks Farsi and Pashto, she could easily take her $30,000 US, which had already been, you know, it was a frozen asset anyway, and easily live happily ever after in one of those nations, in Iran or Afghanistan. When, you know, I'm white, I'm female, I practice.
And you've had a history of fighting ISIS.
Yeah, absolutely. My military service, they made sure to nullify that. The prosecution was able to allege that the only reason why I joined the military when I was 18 years old was to position myself to have a top secret clearance, to release a document to the media 7 years later as a contractor. And the judge did not allow my team to offer a rebuttal.
That's absurd.
So they systematically, you know, like a woke individual who has commentary on criminal justice in the United States, they were able to take that away from me because I made my sister and I were sarcastic about it. Because we had just watched the documentary 13th, you know, and we were saying like, oh, well, yeah, that's why you didn't get shot, because you were white. You know, they said, see how she's so casual about this. She thinks she's going to get off because she's white. And it's like, we were actually making fun of you guys, but okay. You know what I mean? We were making a statement about our country. They said that I wasn't a patriot because I said that the United States is the greatest environmental threat in the world. Again, they were able to take my military service and my veteran status away from me by saying that I only joined the military so I could commit this felony 7 years later. Everything about me, they were able to take away.
So you're not going to get the veteran status back?
Well, I mean, I do. I'm a veteran and I receive my veterans benefits. But anytime we try to tell the court, like, I'm a good person, look, she's a veteran, you can't treat her like that. He's looking at me like, oh, yeah, but you only joined so you could hurt our country. The judge believed everything that they said. He didn't have to understand that I was an expert in counterterrorism, not an expert in terrorism. You know, that I wrote in a journal that said, I want to burn the White House down. Ha ha. That meant I seriously wanted to burn the White House down. You know, things like that. He allowed what they said become fact. And when a judge allows the prosecution to write, and he allowed the prosecution to write the rules moving forward. My attorneys could not discuss my case on a phone line. They waited 6 months for the prosecution to install phone lines in their offices so they could discuss my case. If not, they had to come to a broom closet in the Augusta courthouse, even though my attorneys were operating in Atlanta, New Orleans, and Baltimore. They weren't allowed to do open-ended research. So they couldn't look up other people who've, you know, blown the whistle, other leakers. They couldn't even Google the word Russia. I had an attorney ask the judge, can I Google the word Russia? And he looked over at the lead prosecutor and she shook her head. And he said, no, you can't Google that word. They wrote the rules and the judge let them. How do you stand? What do you do against that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was the second time that I wasn't granted bail that it was like, you know, you just start realizing like, I'm going to die in this jail. That is their master plan. You know, they didn't shoot me when they had the chance. So now they're going to make sure I die in this jail.
Unbelievable. When you were convicted, did you know the course that was set out so that you would be released with a tether in 2021? Or was this also in the course of legal procedure? I
knew that I would have probation.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that it would be a long time to the halfway house, which is like the transition program out of prison. I didn't realize how difficult or traumatic that would be. I thought, okay, you're home with an ankle monitor. How difficult can it be? And they called 3 times a day around the clock. If you don't answer, your escape status. So for a long time, I'm just traumatized by the sound of a phone ringing because it could be them. You know, you can't be away from your phone. You can't even shower without your phone because that's escape status. We had to drive 100 miles round trip every 10 days or so for a drug test. It wasn't even 2 weeks in between. It was every other week, you know, 10 days about. And I wasn't authorized to drive, even though I still owned my vehicle. I wasn't authorized to drive it. So my parents had to take off work for it. It took up the whole day. And, you know, and so many people keep asking like, oh, well, it wasn't a drug conviction. Why are you being drug tested? And I'm like, well, why have you been complicit when your justice system has done this to, you know, 5 million other people who weren't convicted for drugs? Why is this the first time you're understanding that once you're convicted, all they do is test your urine repeatedly until you go insane? I mean, I'm like, everybody gets drug tested. That's the system. How do you not understand that? You know, people don't understand their own criminal justice system. Just little things like that. Like they would grant me a pass like a month in advance. They'd say, you have 3 hours to go grocery shopping on this date. And I would call, like we would get so excited, like you get to go grocery shopping. We would call before, they'd have no record of it. Or they would say, oh, I'm sorry, yesterday we changed the protocol and because of COVID, you can't go out. I finally got the privilege to go to a restaurant And sometimes I would get to go, and then family would come in, and then I would call like, hey, can I go? Like, am I clear? They say, oh, no, I'm sorry. COVID's too bad. But you know what I mean? Like they play with you. They play with their heart. And then to find out when I got on supervised release or probation, I have a 10 p.m. curfew every single night until November 2024.
Okay.
I am 30 years old. I live with my parents, and I have a 10 p.m. curfew.
But at least until then, you can do what you want, and you're not under surveillance.
I am under surveillance. Yes.
Okay.
I'm
so
under
you know where
surveillance.
you are, but you don't have to ask them their permission.
No, I just have to let them know, like, this interview, I have to report this interview. I have to explain what we were talking about. I'm not allowed to leave the southern part of Texas. San Antonio is 2 hours away. I've requested to go for job education and been denied.
Okay.
So I can't even go get my CrossFit level 2 certification. I can't drive more than 2 hours away for it.
Are you allowed to make money? What do you do right now?
I coach CrossFit with the level 1. I would like to get better at my job, but I coach full time.
At a gym, or do you do it online from your house?
I coach at a gym. So Texas is fully open.
Yeah.
And until recently, I worked maintenance for the city. So the public works department, I built street signs. I haven't asked the new probation officer, but I asked the previous probation officer if I could use my GI Bill, my veterans benefits, to go to college. And he said that he wouldn't approve it because I told him that I wanted to study kinesiology. And he said that he couldn't approve something if I can't work at a public high school. I can't work at public schools as a convicted felon. And I said, well, kinesiology, he's like, I'm not trying to become a PE teacher. I want to open a training center. I want to open my own gym. And I think a degree in kinesiology would help.
So they just denied it because they didn't really get what that is.
Yeah. He's always questioning me if I'm around kids. And I'm just like, yeah, I coach a teens program. I don't think he understands what the word espionage means. I think he assumed the worst. And it's just it's re-traumatizing after the types of people I was around in prison to then come out and have a probation officer treat me like I was one of those types of people, because he doesn't know the word espionage. Like, he's never seen a James Bond movie. It's just really like, why? I don't understand why I have to be treated. You know what I mean? Like, I've already been treated like the worst. I've already in court. I made it through everything. And I get out and he wants to treat me like that. It's just really, it's been nothing but trauma after trauma.
But now you have a new one, you said?
Recently, he did retire, and I have a new probation officer. Luckily, he approved the house that I'm living at, so he had to come back and reapprove my parents' house. So they hold that over you, right? They can take away that approval at any time and leave you with nowhere to live. They watch my finances in case I make money. I had to take 4 or 5 back-to-back drug tests. So I had to take time off work and again, drive, because it's 100 miles. It's 50 miles away to the courthouse. And every time they said, you're clean for drugs, but your urine wasn't dark enough. And it's like, but I'm a fitness coach. Like, I'm hydrated. It's summer, like the being told that you're clear of drugs, you're not in violation, but we don't like your body chemistry. Please come back. Okay. I had to do that every single week for like 4 weeks straight.
I mean, how do you make your urine dark enough? I mean, you can't control that.
you have to have like a certain protein count, and they don't understand is I'm a vegetarian. So I'm never going to have dark enough urine as a vegetarian. Like it's never going to be the right composition. So basically I had to eat a bunch of tuna and salmon the night before. Like I was obsessing over it. I was dehydrating myself to the point of being sick, trying to get ready for them. I mean, I obsessed about having the right urine for them, even though I should be worried about whether or not I'm using drugs, but I'm sober.
Yeah.
You know, I've recovered, I'm sober, everything's fine. That's not even the problem. You know, I even offered, can we do the hair follicle? Can we do a drug or a blood test? Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we can do since you guys don't like my urine? And they said, no, we'll just do a urine sample every week until you get it right. So they were just trying to make it difficult for no reason, because they didn't have anything else to make it difficult over.
Because it makes their life difficult as well. It's just stupid.
Yeah. And that's the American tax dollars at work. That's what tax dollars are paying for, to constantly harass people while they're trying to rebuild their lives. You know, and this happens to everybody. It's not just me. Mm-hmm. You know, at any given time, I think there's like 5 million people on federal probation going through this. And it's like, it's just like, you're driving people to insanity and then wondering how they wind up back in prison. How do they fail these conditions, you know? And it's just like you're triggering them into relapsing. You know, they find different ways. They're going to find your weakness and trigger you until you relapse. That's all it is. It's a game.
It's a moronic game. Unbelievable. Let's talk about something positive. I'm very interested in your language skills. I mean, they got you where you are in the first place, but still, I read that you learned Arabic at a very early point, and then other languages. Why do you think that languages interested you so much as a young person, and why was it Arabic in particular?
Well, I never fully learned Arabic. That one's the one that's always eluded me. But I've never taken a formal class in it. Mm-hmm. I've never had that opportunity. But I just remember as a young girl, I remember when the Da Vinci Code came out, you know, and it was all about code breaking, and my dad was obsessed with it. And then 9/11 happened, and it was like a real live Da Vinci Code for him. He wanted to understand why, you know what I mean? Why did this happen to us? And I was, 9, and I wanted his attention. So I wanted to be obsessed with the same thing he was obsessed with. And so he would take us to the library for fun. And I started looking at like the reference section at, the A encyclopedia. I started tracing like, the separated Arabic letters in like the wrong order, and drawing maps of Afghanistan for him. And that never sort of left me. I had always waited until I was just old enough to read the Satanic verses, because my father, we had like this bookshelf, and he would always point to that book. And, that controversy happened just a year before I was born. Mm-hmm. And so it was very much ongoing in my early life. And he was always really intrigued by fanaticism and what drives people to kill other people behind faith, because he studied theology in college. He had his master's in theology and psychology. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to know at that point, at what point did faith become toxic? At what point could people become sociopathic for God, for their faith, and hurt other people? So it was like the perfect time for his interests to peak, and he was coming up with these theories on his own. And I was old enough to finally read and almost slightly understand the Satanic verses at like 10 or 11, to understand like people killing other people out of faith, which is growing up in the middle of nowhere in South Texas, you're actually very separate from, And that never left me. And a couple years later, I was able to go to high school and I chose Latin. And part of learning Latin is you immerse yourself in, ancient Rome. They're not going to teach you how to go into a cafe and order a coffee in Latin like they do in French or Spanish class.
I know. I took Latin as well, and I loved it.
Exactly. Like the Cambridge Latin course, you start literally in Pompeii with the little family. I mean, and so that understanding that you actually do immerse yourself in another world to learn a language. I tried as hard as I could to be at least a year ahead of everybody in Latin. And I taught myself college level Latin. And I just remember I was in an engineering program and was about to be awarded a full ride scholarship for mechanical engineering. I was actually really good at math as well. And they were talking about things like, during the awards ceremony, the speech was about how the computing capacity of the rockets that sent the first man to the moon were less than a desk calculator today. And they announced that like it was like a really big deal, like how far we've come, with technology. And I was thinking about like my dad, and I was thinking about my mom, like people are still hurting their children and people are still killing each other over faith. How far have we come? Like, is technology going to solve either of those? And I don't know why. I was just like, okay, I don't want this anymore. And I wanted to study languages. I wanted to understand terrorism, and I wanted to prevent the next radical terror attack in the United States. So I went to an Army recruiter and I said, hi, I'd like to enlist, and I would like to be a linguist in Middle Eastern and African languages. And they laughed me out of the office. Yeah, you don't just do that. But eventually I took the tests and I proved the aptitude for it. My family staged an intervention and convinced me to join the Air Force. They said it was a little bit better. And I made it through basic training and I started learning Persian Farsi.
But you never got the chance to actually go to this region?
No, I never deployed physically, no.
Are you hoping you can one day be there and do something right there with your language skills?
Yeah. And I mean, not in like, I'm sure the government's gonna like, wet themselves over this, but I would like a world where you and I could both go to Iran as tourists and come back out, because that's like a stable, cooperative world. And, same thing with Afghanistan, that it's a country to visit. It's not falling apart. It's not being, sanctioned into the ground, and it's not stigmatized as being an enemy of the world. In that sense, I would very much like to go. All these years of immersing myself in the language, you do understand the beauty of the culture, that this goes back thousands of years. And that's something in America that we don't have. We don't have a culture that goes back thousands of years unless you are an indigenous tribe or unless you're holding on to, even like if you have your European heritage, how far does that go back? But in those places like Afghanistan and Iran, they still have that art and that sense of what they used to be. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Those are beautiful parts of the world to visit. And that's why I learned those languages.
But I guess today you're not even allowed to practice them, because when you Google something in Farsi, it will be very suspicious.
I'm very aware of that. Yeah. And, I'm very transparent with everything I do from now on. I think my family and we learned right away, if you make a joke, make sure the next line of the text is, ha, 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 this is a joke. This is a joke. We learned that from phone calls as well, just so that there's always going to be a moment like in court where we ask them, well, Your Honor, can we see the entire conversation? can we hear the entire audio where they say, oh, this is a joke, this is why it's funny, which almost makes it funnier, where everything we do is on display for somebody else now. I do practice. I found all my old language textbooks and stuff like that. I learned how to read Hebrew, biblical Hebrew in prison. So that's kind of been my latest project, is to get better at that.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to your humor, have you ever considered writing?
There's definitely a lot of consideration with that. Because the nature of my plea deal, I would not be allowed to make money from it, which, again, this whole same thing with the play, right? There's no financial benefit to me. Mm-hmm. It's about reclaiming my story. I've been really misunderstood by a lot of people. And so for me, it would be a way to get my life back and to move forward. And then, of course, like everything else, make the process as transparent as possible, so that they don't act like I'm trying to profit off my story or my life.
But this will end one day, right?
The prohibition on making money off my story will never end. It's a lifelong, unless I'm pardoned by a president. Mm-hmm. As democratic as American society tries to make itself seem, unfortunately, once you are a convicted felon, the only person that can save you is the president king.
It's a possibility that this happens, right?
The difference between a possibility and a likelihood, Okay,
you don't think it's likely?
Every step of my life, I've been committed to coping as is.
Aside from the language interest, you always were very much into sports and yoga and now the CrossFit. Has this always been a parallel thing or alternate, the two interests?
I think it's always been parallel. I think that it was something in high school that kept me out of trouble. Mm-hmm. It was very much like my only social life too. I think you don't realize until you look back how busy you were. It's an hour during the school day, and then it's another 2.5, 3 hours every night, and then games or tournaments every weekend. Just how much it does. I mean, it's just like CrossFit now, it's at least 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. I like that structure. I like, and I've been in really dark places before, even before the felony. I think that a lot of people don't understand. I didn't just have everything made. I was living in a really dark place, and I did have mental illness, where the only thing that got me to the next day and the day after that was the fact that I would plan my training sessions out, and I was just waiting to get to that training session. Everything else, like my career, as a linguist, all of those were just hours waiting for the next gym session or the next yoga class. For a very, very long time, that was the only thing that actually kept me going. I went on autopilot for a couple years, living with bulimia, and I let it take over my life. Except I also understand, like, every time I got into a really dark place in jail or prison, that it was always there to save me and keep me going one day at a time. Every day I would plan, I'd be like, oh, well, tomorrow you're doing this, tomorrow you're doing. It was always about tomorrow's workout and proving that I could do it. And when I was a fitness instructor in prison for about 1.5 years until we got shut down for COVID. And so many women told me that they learned how to do that too from me, that no matter how bad their day was, they wanted to know what I was going to have them doing in circuit class. No matter how hard it was on the weekends or what they were going through with their family, they wanted to know what my cycling playlist that week would be like, because it was deeper than that. It was an emotional connection that I was able to make. And even I remember the night that the 60 Minutes piece aired on national television, and people were reaching out to me. They found me on social media. a woman messaged me on Facebook. It was, she gave me her name. She said, I don't know if you remember me, but when I got to that prison, I was 418 pounds and I got down to like 380 when we had met. And you remember how I lost like 60 pounds in your exercise classes. And then she told me, now she's like, I think she's down to 215. So she's lost 200 pounds. And she said, she still remembers like what I would have her doing. So whenever she can't go to the gym or anything like that, now that she's out of prison, that she'll remember what I had her doing and she'll remember my passion. She's like, I always remember you yelling at me. And that's what keeps her going. You know what I mean? Like it changed her entire life and put her on that. And that's just like, I saw that message and I was just like, this is why I'm a coach. It's not about just making someone a better athlete. It's about making someone's entire life better.
It's a nice touch. In 2.5 years' time, you will be off probation and you will be able to, within limits, do what you like. What would you like to do? Where would you like to go?
Well, there's definitely some family that they don't have the means to come see me here in Texas. And it breaks my heart that I can't pick up the burden and go see them. They've supported me all these years. Even now, it's like we try to plan for the family to come see me because I can't go see them, being able just to pick up that much burden for my family is going to make all the difference in the world. I would like to continue coaching. I am starting a charity foundation called the Real Winner Foundation. And it's a sponsorship and mentorship program for basically disadvantaged youth and anybody who is, any young adult caught up in the criminal justice system. Because I understand that a gym membership or a CrossFit membership especially is a whole utility payment. It's a privilege. Even though it should be covered by insurance because it's, it's a medical benefit, it's a psychological benefit. It's a privilege. And so what we would like to do is raise enough money to kickstart individuals' journey and basically pay for their gym membership at participating CrossFit boxes or participating group fitness centers where they can come in and theoretically be involved in group fitness, anything that's team-based, that rebuilds a community and healthy social life patterns. Because I don't know if you've ever done CrossFit, but once you do CrossFit, you never stop talking about it. Yesterday, you actually celebrate Memorial Day by getting together and working out. Christmas, there's a Christmas workout, everybody works out Thanksgiving morning. 4th of July. There's never a holiday in CrossFit where it's about going out at night and drinking. Everybody always gets up in the morning and works out together. And it's a healthy community. Everybody never stops talking to each other. And to give that to somebody and to remove the financial barrier is really important to me. And then the mentorship part would be to get either veterans or active duty servicemen or even local police officers, law enforcement to be mentors. If they're at the gym and they see somebody and they would like to mentor them, they can be their accountability. Like, hey, which class are you going today? Let's do it together. Let's do this as a partner. Hey, the gym's closed today. Let's go for a run, And then, of course, the deeper stuff, talking through issues and giving somebody someone to lean on as they try to stay out of jail or prison or, any young person who doesn't have the privilege of playing sports in high school. A lot of kids don't just get to do that.
And you're already building that up now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we're expecting to launch it probably late this summer.
So you would like to continue coaching even when you're free? Or is
Yeah.
do you have other aspirations? I read, I think in the Süddeutsche magazine, the German magazine profile, that you wanted to go to Silicon Valley, but that you don't believe that anybody will give you a job there. But I don't know. I mean, you're kind of famous, so maybe some consider you a hero.
Yeah.
It might work.
You know, I mean, I do have like a computer programming and code writing education. I just want to stay true to myself and what I love. I think that once upon a time, I wasn't true to myself, and I wasn't brave enough to just be a coach. And out of that turmoil, I committed a felony.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this happened because I was too afraid to just be a coach. And so I want to provide a form of social justice through my coaching. And then also be like, right now, I can't even go talk to my elected representatives because they're too far away. I couldn't go talk to my congressman, and I can't go talk to my senator because they're both outside of the district. I want to be able to go to DC. I want to testify in front of Congress about prison conditions. I want to talk to them about mass incarceration. I want to demand that the promises that were given, you know, in the 2020 election, that Joe Biden would start to reverse mass incarceration. We know, I mean, it is a documented fact that the war on drugs was a continuation of Jim Crow slavery to imprison as many American bodies as possible, because it's a profitable industry. And those are the people lobbying Congress to keep these laws in place. It's a fact why certain drugs are legal, because certain minorities use them. How is that law still in place? How is that law enforcement's number one priority to find drug addicts and not prevent mass shootings in America? You know, they'll profile you online and find out what you're addicted on before they'll find out if you have an assault rifle or not. They care more about addiction as a crime than they do about mental illness. And so, I mean, and all it would take would be an act of Congress to reverse this. So, you know, there's some money involved. You know, there's some lobbying involved to keep the prison industrial complex going and healthy and provided with as many human bodies as possible. If not, even the probationary period, I mean, there is no one part of my probation conditions that's genuinely intended to prevent me from committing Section 93E of the Espionage Act again. Mm-hmm. It's all about checking my urine. It's all about making sure I'm not out away from my house at 10:01 p.m. It's all these little conditions that just make my reentry into society harder, to give them something to imprison me over. And that's what every person who's gotten out of prison is experiencing. It's not preventing them from committing wire fraud again. It's not preventing them from selling drugs again, or trafficking, or committing murder. None of it is about preventing the next crime. It's how can we get you back in prison where we can profit off your body and continue to abuse you. Mm. If that's a well-known fact and our elected leaders won't go back on it, then they're slave owners, every single one of them. Mm. And so it's a very troubling place. And I just think that using my platform and using the small amount of notoriety that I have and continuing to stay active and to stay vocal these next 3 years and not disappearing. Mm-hmm. When I'm ready to travel, when I'm really ready to testify in front of my own government,
you will.
You know, I want it to be impactful, and I want to free as many innocent lives as possible and give people a chance at living again.
We're going back to May 2017, apart from, of course, being caught and having experienced what you have, would mm-hmm. you do it again?
No.
No.
And this is, the consequences are severe, and I betrayed my nation's trust. So, of course, I would never do it again. I would never betray my country like that. I was given one responsibility and I went against it, and I always take responsibility for that. However, I was incredibly naive at that time. I was slowly becoming aware of the oppression that was present in United States society before then. If I had known that the single greatest threat to United States democracy was voter suppression and the suppression of the Black vote in America, I wouldn't have worried about anything but that. Mm-hmm. I would have been out knocking on doors and registering people to vote and doing the grassroots organization that so many thousands of people had decided to do before 2020. That democracy is saved when the people are heard and when the people have access to the ballot. So I would have made my focus to be solely domestic and solely local, and to understand that the power of federal level elections is at the county, and every county is different, and every county, especially in the South, has a way of preventing Black people from casting their votes. To understand that and to think about what I did, I was absolutely a fool. I should have understood the real challenges facing our country. But I had to live them. I had to go through the prison industrial complex and see the victimization that's being done, and the fact that slavery never ended in this country. I had to experience it firsthand to understand that the true state of our nation. Well, so that's why I wouldn't do it again, because there is a real enemy, and it's us. We are the enemy.
Pretty high price you paid for learning that.
Yeah, 4 years of the most real education that you can get.
Sie hörten Reality Winner im Gespräch mit Martin Pesl über Zoom aus ihrem Hausarrest in der Wohnung ihrer Mutter in Texas. Das Theaterstück Is This a Room der New Yorker Gruppe Straddle basiert auf dem wortwörtlichen Transkript ihrer Verhaftung am 3. Juni 2017. Es ist von 13. bis 16. Juni im Rahmen der Wiener Festwochen in der Halle G im Museumsquartier zu sehen. Ich verabschiede mich von allen, die uns auf UKW hören, im Freirad Tirol und auf Radio Agora in Kärnten. Wenn Sie wissen wollen, was läuft bei den Wiener Festwochen und überhaupt in der Welt von Kunst und Theater, dann ist der Falter unverzichtbar. Martin Pesl, der dieses Interview geführt hat, liefert jede Woche aktuelle Berichte von den Aufführungen. Ein Abonnement des Falter können Sie im Internet bestellen unter der Adresse abo.falter.at. Ursula Winterauer hat die Signation gestaltet, Miriam Hübel und Philipp Dietrich betreuen die Audiotechnik im Falter. Ich verabschiede mich bis zur nächsten Folge.
Sie hörten das Falter-Radio, den Podcast mit Raimund Löw.